And one thing I observed was that when businesses start to lose market share, start to generate operating losses, start eating away cash reserves, you have no choice but to become a salary slasher, job cutting jerk. I know from the outside, people might think, wow, those guys really lost their heart. No, we were the same executives. We had the same heart. We just lost our ability to take care of employees because we didn't keep up with the competition. We got disrupted, right?
Hmm.
So that's why Theory X is so important, because you don't lose your sense of generosity when times are bad. You just lose your ability to take care of people and say yes to things. So that's why Theory X is so critical, and as is Theory Y. Theory X, Y has got to be together so you always have results, because without X, there's no Y. Just like
Hmm.
without Y, there's no X.
Welcome to Manager, a podcast about the experiences of people leaders and how we can enable them to lead engaged, healthy, and high-performing teams. I'm Kamaria Scott, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you join us as we learn, lead, and succeed together. Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Manager. If you have experienced me live or you have sat in on any of my development classes, you know that I believe that a good people leader is someone who can balance both relationships and results. They can take care of the business and the people. And so I'm really excited about today's guest because he's going to be able to share with you what does that actually really mean and how do you do both of those things, especially in these trying times. Today's guest, Phil Nahajewski, is going to share from his own experience what it's like to worry about the people, worry about the business, and you're going to hear it from him, who is actually a CFO. So different for our audience, but super exciting. So Phil, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kamaria. Pleasure to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. Phil and I know each other from Disrupt HR, and I have to tell you, you have missed a treat if you've never seen his last presentation, Let's Get Fractional. So I'm going to tell you right now, go off, search Let's Get Fractional, Disrupt HR, and you'll see a wonderful presentation.
Thank you. That was so much fun.
It was a tremendous amount of fun to do. So tell the guests a little bit about yourself, your history, a little about your career, your experience leading people, and what you do now.
Well, I'll start with what I do now, because you mentioned fractional. I'm a fractional CFO, Chief Financial Officer, and a partner in the Florida CFO Group. And I love Disrupt HR, where we met. I love having fun with my 5-minute talk. And I tried something bold last time, as you mentioned. I actually got a choreographer to get 6 of my fractional friends on stage and be my Olivia Newton-John wannabes, because my theme song was Let's Get Physical. I changed it to be Let's Get Fractional. And it was a blast.
That's who I knew you were somebody that I needed to meet, because I said a true leader is someone who can get 5 people to get in front of the room in spandex and dance to Let's Get Physical. So I knew, I said, I need to, this person's a leader. People are following. Let me meet him and get him on the episode. And what about your career prior to being a fractional CSO? Tell us a little about your history.
Sure. Now I'll go back, way back to the other end of the spectrum. I don't know if I told you about this, Kamaria, but I'm an identical twin. And I grew up in Detroit in the baby boom in the days before video games, where what we did, especially living in this Polish Catholic neighborhood in Detroit, where every house had 6, 7 kids, all day, all day long, my brother and I would be competing against each other with our teams in baseball, basketball, football, hockey. We were hyper competitive, and I'm still are to this day. And in fact, my wife kids me whenever I get together with my brother that, oh, here comes Nahajewski scoreboard, because we're always competing. So I hit the workplace definitely as a Theory X, results oriented guy. That's the way I grew up. It's the way I was built and wired. And I was always about competing and getting the best results. And when I got promoted to my first managerial position, I was 25 years old. And
Mm.
I was working for a multi-billion-dollar company and I landed the job of being the manager of the general accounting department. And it was the first time I experienced management training. And that's the first time I heard about XY, which is X for results, Y for people. It's not an either or decision to make or a balancing act. It's going for the 10 in both results and people. And I went into that class being very imbalanced, being very X, and had to learn about the importance of getting the Y out of me developed. So that's my theory
I
Y background.
That's your theory XY background. I think so many of us who get promoted probably start off more on the X side of things because we are promoted because we are high achievers. We are people who get things done. And I heard you say scoreboard, and we are results oriented. So we know the number of whatever it is we're doing, and we are shooting for that number. I used to tell people like I want an A. So I wasn't necessarily an athlete, but I was a great student. So I was always like, I want an A in whatever this is. And when I first started leading people, I brought that I want an A mentality with me as well. So yeah, 3X, 3Y. I was very excited when you mentioned that during our prep talk because it is something that, in the way that we talk about people leadership, we talk about being able to be results oriented, but also all the things we talk about with employee engagement, with employee experience. That's the Y side, and that's the how we're taking care of the people who actually do the work. I want to sort of bring this down to the manager level, though, because you mentioned you might have shown up more on the X side than the Y side. Why do you think managers maybe find it challenging to be in the middle? Why they might struggle to achieve balance and why they maybe one or the other?
Well, I think we're all just wired certain ways and have our ways of thinking. And what the theory XY is all about is realizing and learning. It's not a choice, it's not a balance. It's you can be 10, you need to be 10 in both. You need to be developing your talents as a manager and leader to get the best results and create the best experience for your people. And they're so intertwined. I mean, one thing I learned through decades of being a CFO is you really can't have one without the other. If you're all about results, your people are going to leave you and you're not going to get those results anymore because you're going to have an employee retention issue impeding your results. And if you're all about the people, you're going to find that you're not going to have cash in the bank to take care of those people. And even though your heart's in the right place, your bank balance is going to prevent you from being as people oriented as you want to be.
Yes. So both of them are really necessary. And I do think it's important for us to find that balance. Can you bring that to life for me in terms of I'm not in charge of how we directly make money, especially if I work in L&D, right? So what does that look like for me as a people leader on a day-to-day basis? If I'm trying to balance both the results, take care of the business and take care of the people, what might that look like on the team level?
Sure. Well, even in L&D, I mean, you have results you're delivering. You're delivering leaders, right? Your leaders that need to become XY leaders that have to have an understanding of how to deliver the results as well as be strong on the people side. One thing that with my business experience over many, many decades, you kind of, especially as a CFO, figure out that there's a number that everybody in the organization has as their prime reason for being employed. Something that captures the essence of what the business is hoping to get out of that relationship with the employee. And part of the manager's role is to make sure that there's visibility toward the results, there's coaching toward the results, there's accountability toward the results. It's about leading and managing and holding people accountable. It's focused on results, but you know that if you want sustainable results, people only stick around at workplaces where they feel respected and where they're making a meaningful contribution and where they're working with a manager and a leader that they feel good about spending time with, right? So
Yeah.
it's intertwined.
It's so interesting to hear this coming from a CFO, I think, because I think a lot of us in the organization, when we think CFO, we think, oh my gosh, they don't get it. They're all about the numbers. They don't understand about the people side. And so to hear you as a CFO sharing that both, thinking about organizational results and thinking about people, it's equally important. I think it's heartening for a lot of managers. I would like to dig a little bit into your history because you said that you started off very on the results side, right? And even your career lends to the numbers of things. Talk to me then about how you developed, how did you get to center? That's when I'm with my managers, I call it getting to center. How did you get to center on balancing the X and Y personally as a leader?
Okay. And this is where we're going to disagree, Kamaria, because my goal is not to get to the center, is get to the upper right of the quadrant, right? Because
That's
center is
right.
5 and 5, if you're totally balanced. I go for 10 and 10. And I'll tell you, there was two very early in my career experiences that really shaped me to focus on the why. One was just in that first management training class I had, principles of management, that was all new managers had to take to before they sat in that manager seat. And long before video games and Legos, there was something called Tinker Toys. Do you remember?
Yes.
Well, this was a training exercise that 40 years later, I'm still remembering profoundly. They paired off the trainees into pairs, and of each pair, there was a blindfold, a bunch of Tinker Toys, and a set of instructions face down. And each pair, someone had to be the manager, someone had to be the worker. The worker put the blindfold on, had Tinker Toys in front of them, and for half and the manager had the diagram of what had to be built. No words could be communicated. Half the class had to communicate the touching people whenever the worker did something right. The other half of the class had only could communicate by touching the person when they did something wrong. And it was so powerful because all across half of the room where the positive feedback was given with a touch every time a Tinker Toy was put in the right place, the diagram got executed and fulfilled, and it was a positive, happy, successful, results producing experience. On the other half of the room, not only was not a single thing built, but the manager and the employee were about ready to come to blows because all you got was touching you for doing something wrong, and you're doing it wrong, you're doing it wrong, you're doing it wrong. That was such a powerful lesson about the importance of giving positive feedback that gave me a sense of why the why side is so important, because it produced results and avoided conflict.
I like it. You know what? I have never done that exercise, but I feel compelled now the next time I can get people leaders in one place in person, I'm gonna try that and I'm gonna video it and I'll send it back to you.
So the second story, relatively early in my career, I progressed through the company's ranks because I was pretty good at re-engineering departments. We were a computer mainframe business, had a lot of re-engineering to do so we can use our own hardware, software to create more efficient accounting operations. And I had succeeded in my first two management engagements and was given a third one that was considered to be very challenging because the expert manager, longtime manager that ran the department, was known for being slow and difficult to work with. And everybody thought he was problematic, but no one knew maintenance billing for the company more than John. So I was given the assignment of, as I've been at the director level, of getting John to lead this reengineering project. I know something off about John. His heart wasn't in it. His brain wasn't in it. He was just not totally there. And by the way, at this point in time, I'm in my mid to late 20s, and John's twice my age, and probably knew 1,000 times more about maintenance billing than I did. So we're in my office behind the closed doors having a discussion about how to move the project along. And something in me said, there's something else we need to talk about. And I just let John open up to me and about the personal challenges he had in his family life with his daughter, who was almost dying from alcoholism.
Oh my,
And it was a thing that he was carrying around every day and didn't have confidence to talk to anybody about it. And just would carry that burden all by himself. And I just let him open up. There's nothing I could say. I didn't have any kind of experience I could relate to, but other than just listen and care. And that's all I did, was listen and care. And periodically we get behind closed doors and John would give me updates, and just felt the need to, unburden himself of what he was going through. And as things developed, where I think that unburdening gave John the positive feeling about himself to just carry the ball over the goal line. And the project was a remarkable success. And well, I remember the manager a couple of levels above me, actually, the CFO for the division, called me into his office and said, John's getting all the credit, Phil, but we all know you're the guy who turned him around. all I did was listen and care. I didn't have to prod. And that was just a story that proved to me that theory Y generates results. You can't separate the theory Y and theory X.
Yes. I think that's first, it's a beautiful story, and I think it fully encapsulates the conversation that we have with people leaders today about how important it is to care about the whole person. And I know it's hard because I think it makes us have to play many roles. Like we don't just kind of show up and manage the work. There are humans who are in our care for a certain amount of time, and we have to care about them in order to get the best out of them. And I think it's a beautiful example of that. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. What that brings to mind for me is there's a lot of times where we're pulling people maybe from the X side to the Y side. But I will admit there are times when I am team fun, and there are people who perhaps are leaning a little more toward the Y side than the X side, or they're not the right access, I'll say that. And so how do we help someone who perhaps is not overly results oriented, but finds themselves not as results oriented as we would like for them to be? How do we help them?
Yeah. And there's two tactics that I deploy when I experience that. One is really investing myself in explaining why the results are important. They're not important because someone's trying to get to a bonus. The bonuses are always based on trying to attain a set of business results that inherently have some true meaning to increasing the value of the business. And it's a learned skill to be able to explain to maybe less results oriented, maybe less financially oriented people, their contribution to the overall financial success of the business is so critical. And the attempt to explain it shows that person that, yeah, I'm thinking about the Y side, you need to think about the X side. We got to both evolve toward getting a little more results oriented. Now you have to complement that with a very visible scoreboard. I'd say scorecard, but the difference between a scorecard and scoreboard is scoreboards are visible to everybody. Scorecards is somewhat you might keep for yourself to see how you're doing, or it might be between the manager and the employee. But where you really get great performance is when that performance is posted and visible so that everybody's aware of your contribution or when you're not contributing. And of course, it has to be married with a strong culture where we're supportive and encouraging and helping people out who maybe score is off the mark. You pair that and you get a results focused with a good team culture, and you're getting to that 10-10 XY level.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I do try to keep balance in even the content and things that we talk about on this podcast, because I think a lot of it lends towards people, people, people. And that's important. But I will tell you, a lot of the business leaders that I support are operations leaders. And so I know it weighs heavy on their heads and their hearts, not just taking care of the people, but the real goals, objectives, and health of the organization. And so how do we make sure that not only are we focusing on things like engagement and again experience and we're displaying empathy, but all of that works together because the goal is to create a win-win scenario for the business and the organization. So one of the things that I'm so curious to talk to you about is that when we did our prep call and in one of our initial conversations, you talked about being present in the rise and fall of an organization. And so I find, and I'm curious if this is true for you too, that sometimes the way that we lead in good times and the way that we lead in challenging times can be a bit different. And so from your experience, what do you see are some of the key differences in leading teams when we are having a great time with companies practically printing money versus
Yeah.
when it might be having a more challenging time?
And I love the question, Kamaria. It brings back a lot of good memories and some not so good ones as well. Because I got to enjoy the glory years of two big industries, computer mainframes in the 19 and cable TV in the 1990s and 2000s. I was born 2 months before Steve Jobs and 10 months before Bill Gates. And in the early 80s, I'm probably ahead of those guys. While they were dinking around in the garages inventing the future, I was climbing the corporate ladder of the second largest computer mainframe company in the world. And we grew from a $2 billion company to a $5 billion in my first 6 years with the company. Then we acquired another $5 billion company and became a $10 billion company. And all during that time, there were opportunities galore for young managers that were performing well and willing to step up and say yes to big challenges. And employee benefits were bountiful. I mean, our company had its own golf course for its employees. That's how it was
You
back
had
in
a
the
golf
glory
course for
days.
employees? That was you just, oh
Yeah,
my goodness.
yeah. Girls
I have
Farms.
definitely missed the glory days.
Yeah, that was glorious times. Now, then these two disruptive young punks, Bill and Steve, came out of the garages and turned our $2 billion company into a $3 billion company. I jumped out at when we hit about the 8 billion mark because I tell you, it's no fun when your job is basically wait till the next Black Friday and decide which 20% of your team you have to say goodbye to.
Oh,
Uh,
goodness.
and it was horrible. I then joined the world of cable TV, which in 1990 was still a bit fledgling. The old guys that were around longer than I like to say, I was with cable since before cable was cool. Well, 20 years later, I was one of the old guys saying I was with cable back when it was cool. We probably had 18 glorious years, but eventually, Netflix, YouTube,
Hmm.
Google, Facebook started taking both video and ad dollars, and times weren't that glorious. And one thing I observed was that when businesses start to lose market share, start to generate operating losses, start eating away cash reserves, you have no choice but to become a salary slasher, job cutting jerk. I know from the outside, people might think, wow, those guys really lost their heart. No, we were the same executives. We had the same heart. We just lost our ability to take care of employees because we didn't keep up with the competition. We got disrupted, right?
Hmm.
So that's why Theory X is so important because you don't lose your sense of generosity when times are bad. You just lose your ability to take care of people and say yes to things. So that's why Theory X is so critical, and as is Theory Y. Theory X, Y has got to be together so you always have results because without X, there's no Y. Just like
Hmm.
without Y, there's no X.
Yeah. It's interesting because, and I always tell people this way, I've been through three layoffs. I think right now, there's a lot of people going through layoffs. There's a lot of disruption in the industry, especially with AI and a lot of what we're seeing with technology. And there's a lot of just shifts happening that are causing companies to lose their ability to say yes to things. And so I do wonder, like, how can we again bring that down to a manager level? Like, what does that mean for me as a people leader, and how can I make sure that I am leading effectively through those downturns and disruptions? But before you answer that, because I love that you are CFO, and I think sometimes we don't hear explained the way you just did it from a very senior executive. Like, it's not that we don't want you to have these things. It's we honestly can't afford it right now. I don't know that I've ever heard that level of transparency. So I'm wondering, do you think that's an area where as a senior leader, as an executive, there can be more honest conversation to help employees understand some of these transitions a little bit more? And then we'll talk
Yes,
about at the manager level.
definitely. I mean, I do believe that the more that the whole organization realizes that we enjoy glory days, we enjoy benefits because we're staying ahead of the competition. We're delivering results for our customers. That's the source of all good things. And if we get complacent, if we get a little less competitive and a little bit less innovative about delivering great things for our customers, those things go away. So
Hmm.
it's another way of saying we can't take our foot off the X pedal. We got to always be thinking about how do we sustain all this good stuff. Well, we only sustain it by delivering results for your customers, right?
Yeah.
So it's how you, it's I think we got to consider that the reason for driving engagement is that enjoy good things now. We're only going to keep enjoying them if we all engage and beat the competition on a regular
That's
basis
right. I
and
love
not
it.
getting disrupted. We want to make sure everybody helps us be disruptors and not disrupted, right?
I love it. And if that's, I tell you what, as somebody who's been as an IO psychologist and has been in employee engagement all of my career, one of the earliest things that used to frustrate me is when people would say, you have to have a business case for it. And I'd be like, no, you don't. But I think what you just said is the business case, right? It's the ultimate business case of why employee engagement matters, why employee experience matters, because again, those things are so intricately related that you simply cannot have one without the other. So thank you for sharing that. And then when we think about then bringing that down to the manager level, so like how do we prepare people to lead through downturns, through disruptions? How does theory XY come into place if I'm a manager and I need to understand what does this mean to me on my level? How do I bring that to life?
Yes. I mean, the only really good answer, Kamaria, is that we get engaged and we all bring our superpowers to stay ahead of the competition. Because when things are bad, it's because we weren't that effective in the past. So can we recover? It's hard to, but you got to try. You got to see if you can figure out how you take your role in the organization in collaboration with everybody else's, so we can overcome the disruption and find the new markets to conquer and find a way to regain the customers we lost, regain the pricing power we had. That's all focusing on customers and the business and delivering good customer experiences and good financial outcomes. Uh,
Yeah.
you really can't have when things are bad, they're bad. I mean,
It's just what it is.
all you can do is work as hard as you can to sustain the good results as long as possible.
Mm-hmm. And so thinking about your experience, in both good and bad times, what is it like to lead a team through that? So can you take me through maybe an experience of, you're in an organization, you're watching what's happening around you, but you still have care for a team, and so you're leading them through a challenging period. How did you navigate that? And what did you learn that you might share with someone who is now in the middle of an organization that is going through a layoff, is watching the disruption happen? If you are a manager talking to another manager, what did you learn that you can share with them?
Yeah, that hopefully it's not too late if you're going through that to turn the tide. The only way to make things better is to improve company performance, help find ways to win back customers, win back pricing power, create good customer experiences, stay outward focused. I think one of the things that brings companies down is the shift from external to internal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's tough when the axe starts swinging. You are looking around to see who's it going to get to next. And it almost forces your direction inward, which is the exact wrong thing to do. The attention should always be, how can we win more customers back? How can we get new customers? How can we disrupt others? How can we overcome the disruption to happen to us? How can we get more innovative? Getting outward focused is really the only thing you can do. You need to minimize the look inward at where the conflict's happening and focus on how we can beat the competition.
Yeah. So I think what I hear you saying is that, if I'm a people leader and the senior leadership has invited and presented the opportunity, how do I encourage my team to still be thinking innovation, to still be thinking creativity? And how do I put them at ease during this time so that they can think about these things? How do I help them understand and provide clarity on the what and why of what's happening and what's within our scope of influence? And so to your point, as I said, I work in L&D, and so maybe it's not about me necessarily directly impacting the bottom line, but maybe my contribution is how can I lead more design thinking innovation courses that can help the company think about how they can then re-engage the company. And that's my team's contribution to solving that problem.
Yeah. Well, no, by the way, L&D, here's a way I would portray your contribution to the financial success of a business. As an HR professional, I'm sure you know what salary compression is.
I do.
Yeah. You have to go out and hire outside to bring in talent. All of a sudden, you got salary compression issues that's going to cost more than that one person cost. It's going to bleed across the cost of the whole organization. How do you overcome that? L&D, right? That's your financial rationale for how you sustain the business's profitability. If you're successful, you're avoiding a future salary compression problem because you're growing the talent internally rather than have to go pay for market rates outside. So, I mean, L&D is something that carries its own weight. And I'll also point out the example that back this now almost 25 years ago, the most valued company in the world was General Electric. Jack
Mhm.
Welch. If you read his book, Winning, yeah, one of the ways he won was he made his own conversion from theory X to theory Y. He built the most powerful, effective leadership development institution inside General Electric that made them the most valued company in the world in the late 90s. So there's plenty of business case to be made for L&D. And the key is let's all combine our superpowers, finance, HR,
Yes,
operations, to beat the competition.
love
So,
it.
so we never have to face those bad times.
I love that. I love that. And what you just taught me in this moment, and which is why I love this podcast, because I learned so much from the guests. I would say what you just taught me in this moment is the importance of if I'm a people leader, it really is important for me to be clear about how my team and my function tributes to the financial success. Because you're absolutely right. In all the years that I have been doing this, I'm aware, I know what salary compression is, and we do talk about retention, but we never really talk about the financial implications of retention is important because it's the cost of having to recruit more people that inflates what we're paying for talent across the organization. And we can absolutely quantify that. And as learning people, I don't know that we often bring that real dollar amount to the table. And so whether you're in L&D or you're in another role, if you as the leader don't have the clear vision as to how you're contributing to the results, it's really hard for you to then build your own strategies around how you're contributing and what you should be doing.
Well said.
Thank you. Lesson received. So let's talk a little bit because you said superpowers. And I know one of the things that you are a fan of is strengths-based management. So let's chat about that a little bit. I think a lot of people are very familiar with it in concept, but talk to me about like how do we use that to combine our superpowers to better the organization and keep us on the good side of things?
Yes. Well, it definitely is an XY tactic. Businesses are going to perform better when people are doing what they're strong at. People are going to be happier when they're doing what they're strong at because they're going to stick around some more because everybody enjoys doing what they're good at and being successful. So it is just such a powerful XY thing to do. And I love the book Strengths 2.0, where you get to learn everybody's strengths on your team. And because it's not just about you, what you're doing, what you're strong at, but you knowing what your teammates are strong at.
Mm.
So everybody, you can set yourself up so you get to direct tasks and challenges to people based on their strengths and just getting to know your teammates' strengths and getting them to appreciate yours. So much good comes out of that, both from a results perspective and also just from a team building, people building perspective.
I love it. Do you by any chance remember your top five?
I do.
Oh, what are they?
I'm strategic. I'm an achiever. I'm self-assured. I'm a maximizer. And oh, what's my fifth one? I'm struggling to remember my fifth one. I usually have struggle with
Oh
memory.
no.
Sure.
It's okay. We'll take your
Competitive.
top four. I love that.
Competitive. How can I forget competitive?
Competitive. That's oh,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
should have
yeah.
led with that one because you did start with your scoreboard. That's
Yes, yeah.
absolutely interesting. Yeah, it's so funny. Mine are learner, strategy, achiever, relator, and individualization.
So we're both strategic achievers. We have that in common.
We are. I love that. So there's been so much love from this episode, and I appreciate it. I love the sort of light we were able to talk about what really is a sometimes direct and can feel like dry topic, but when we talk about results. And I'm wondering if you can share, like, is that something that you've always been able to bring as a people leader? So laughter in the workplace, just kind of making things enjoyable. Is that always something you've been able to do even in the challenging times?
Yeah, I've been a collector of jokes. One thing, because I moved around a lot. The computer business moved me from Detroit to Syracuse to Philadelphia. Cable TV moved me to Ohio, South Carolina, Tampa, and Orlando. And one thing about moving around is that your old jokes become new to your new cities,
The different people.
new to everybody except for your wife, who has to listen to the same old jokes over and over again. But thankfully, she puts up with me. But I just love collecting jokes, and the more you tell, the more you hear. And it's there's something magical about finding the perfect joke for a situation. because laughter brings teams together. I mean, everybody has different perspectives, but if you find things that we can all laugh at together, it's just a magical thing. So I'm a big believer in laughter in the workplace. One of my laughter as a management tactic stories was when we moved to South Carolina, we had to create a new operation and had to build a budget with a bunch of rookies on the team. And I had a financial analyst I had to convince to work at least a double shift, if not a triple shift, to get the budget done in time. And the way I got him to stick around was with every milestone he reached, he got a new joke for me. And thankfully for them, I had enough of a joke repertoire where I can go through two shifts of working out a budget with a joke every hour or so.
I love that. And it's so interesting because when you, I think even in difficult times, when you can laugh about something, you can deal with it better. I'm reminded of a project that my team was working on, and we were testing a new virtual learning platform. And halfway through, we realized that the way people connected to the platform, half of them couldn't go into the breakout rooms and half of them couldn't hear us, which was hilarious. And so one of my team members created Teams backgrounds for us that said have a dumpster fire free day. And
Uh,
we would just laugh about it. Like we was like, oh, that happened. And we learned from it, but the laughter in it made it so that it wasn't like a oh no, crisis. It was a yikes, and we laughed and we moved on.
that's funny. So I'll tell you my Theory X joke
Oh, I love that.
about rough times. So one manager is leaving his office carrying his cardboard box of belongings on his way out, and a new manager walks in. The old manager says, I did you a favor, pal. I put 3 envelopes in your bottom left-hand desk drawer, numbered 1, 2, and 3. Whenever you get into trouble, pull out an envelope and they'll give you some advice. Okay. New guy, totally confident, says, I won't need it. I'm cool. I got hired for a reason. This is going to go great, as all new hires are. Well, after a few months of struggles, that new manager decides that it's time to go to that bottom left-hand desk drawer, pulls out the envelope number 1, and in it is a piece of paper with 3 words. Blame your predecessor. So he does it. He buys himself some time. Everything's his predecessor's fault. For a while, he gets away with it, but the performance is not being delivered. So after another couple of months, he says, it's time for envelope number 2. So he goes in that desk drawer and pulls out envelope number 2. Again, 3 words. Reorganize the department. So he announces the department reorganization and buys himself some time, and things still aren't working very well. And after a couple months of taking some heat, he thinks it's time for envelope number 3. So he goes in that bottom hand left drawer and pulls out the envelope, and again, 3 words. Prepare 3 envelopes.
I love that. That is a great joke, sir. I love that one.
Yes.
And that is a perfect ending for our conversation. Thank you for that. This has been such a delightful conversation. First of all, I think people don't think that CFOs are funny. So I think you gave us a little unexpected humor, which I really loved. And I do appreciate just the very real human way that we have discussed, but probably a lot of people are going through right now and trying to figure out how to either recover from results not being wonderful or trying to figure out how to achieve new results that can help them take better care of their teams and how to really take care of their teams during those times. So I appreciate your wisdom and your time in sharing that with us on behalf of all the listeners. Just thank you for your time. And for you listeners, on behalf of Phil and myself, I really encourage you to consider if you are 10 and 10 on results and relationships and how you're leading. If you're finding that maybe you're not strong in one of those areas, think about how you might either implement some sort of a digital scorecard or think of a way to improve the results, help your team maybe collaborate and be more innovative together, or think about what you might need to be doing to build trust, more laughter, more psychological safety on your teams that's going to help them to have the work environment that's going to help you to succeed. I think the overall takeaway here is that it's an and, not an or. So on behalf of Phil and myself, thank you for listening to this episode of Manager and to Manager. Take care of yourself and each other until we see each other again.